Today, we're going to crunch into the new lore about this fibrous character as part of a nutritious discussion. Yeah. Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now, this was bound to happen. Despite the fact that Ultra Instinct didn't get wrapped up here in this chapter, nor did Goku get really much when it came to a telling off from the likes of Krillin or even Vegeta, like we hoped, we still had plenty to work from in this latest tome from the Dragon Ball Super manga. So naturally, it's that time again. The new arc got teased in chapter 67 of the Dragon Ball Super manga, and we're here to investigate. If you're watching this video then, I think it's quite clear to you and I that you probably aren't really bothered with spoilers, and that's okay. We want to do what we do best here: speculate, provide conjecture, and of course be completely wrong about certain stuff, because we don't have enough information. We must point that out here. Why do we subject ourselves to this much inaccuracy and derision? Because it's fun! So let's get straight into this, shall we? Of course, aside from a proper closure to the Galactic Prisoner arc, a much better closure than, let's say, the manga version of the Tournament of Power arc, I am still happy with this photograph of Goku and the gang in the latest chapter. We were also teased with a new character, one named Granolah. Naturally, we've had plenty of leaks about this guy over the previous few days before the manga chapter was released, as to be expected these days. But we now have a little more intel to go on than back then. That mysterious character is said to be a massively important figure in the next chapter of Dragon Ball Super, sort of like the Mirrors of this arc, the thing that brought it all together at the beginning. We know that he and his partner, Oatmeal, are interested in OG-73I, the main 7-3 unit that we've seen most of the Moro saga, for reasons yet unknown to us. Aside from the fact that he was stealing it from its original owners rather than defending it like some of the initial theories thought. We also know that the previous owners of this thing were interested in using their current army of OG soldiers to control the universe. You know, the usual stuff. It did provide us some background information for 7-3 though, ultimately, in that he was merely one of many. But the truly fascinating thing about Granolah is the fact that him and his yet unseen partner seem to be interested only in the real deal. No copies, no previous versions, they want 7-3. Also, the title of the arc, Granolah the Survivor? What did he survive? He did survive Toriyama's cutting room floor, because this arc is now being mostly penned by him as per previous interviews. Now we can possibly compare this arc to the Moro arc when this new one is over. Toriyama versus Toyotaro, the pupil versus the master. It's time to present 5 possibilities for Granolah's identity. Starting with number 1. He's yet another angel trainee, or an angel turned mortal. This is the first theory that Hav and I had, without knowing that Mirrors was back of course, and how Granolah would look in colour, was that maybe this person's an ex-angelic being, just like Mirrors. What gave us that idea? Well, a lot of the angles and shots of his face kind of resembled the way Mirrors was presented to us in his initial chapters when he was debuted. But okay, let's be honest here. Even in Toriyama's day, there were plenty of jokes about Dragon Ball characters having the same basic face. And it's actually been sort of emboldened as of late, with Moro basically looking like Cell, or Piccolo, or Hit, or any other humanoid villain. What kind of made this angelic connection stronger though, was the fact that one of the unused Toyotaro designs for the angels, something we actually shared originally back in our Universe 13 discussion, looked similar to some degree, especially with the very characteristic hairstyle. But it's close but no cigar though. It's a good sign though that at least some of these sketches are being repurposed to some extent. Also, they both kind of rely on technological gadgets, Mirrors and Granolah, to aid them in their journey. But you know, now we've seen him in colour, and the scheme that he has doesn't seem all that angelic, more resembling something from Dragon Quest or even Chrono Trigger. It's minty fresh though, that's for sure. Now, does that mean that this series is completely dead? Not necessarily. There are plenty of ways an angel can disguise themselves. After all, Dragon Ball Super has purposefully kept angels quite mysterious to us, and their power set seems almost limitless. This to ensure that any possible MacGuffin can be easily justified by an angel. They can do that? Well, of course they can, they're an angel. Simple. It's actually rather brilliant. Granolah being able to camouflage, it's not all that complex. Or maybe like in Mirrors' case, he was turned into a mortal at an earlier date. an earlier example. In a way, Mirus is a survivor of Erasure, so he could be called Mirus the Survivor. Maybe the same thing applied to Granolah, but he became vengeful instead of grateful. Maybe he hopes that 7-3 still has some traces of angelic power through Moro, the power that was stolen from Mirus perhaps? Maybe Oatmeal is the other angel from the concept. Maybe Oatmeal is actually a she, and they both were cases similar to Mirus. How likely do we find this all to be really? Well, considering we just had an angel trainee arc, we don't consider this very likely. It would be very repetitive, and I think could cause some audience members to lose interest quickly. Though it is worth noting that, unlike the previous arc, the Moro and Granolah arcs seem to have a very much closer connection to one another, as well as a feeling of continuation, something we don't often see. We're going to give this notion 5 bowls of cereal out of 10. We aren't really sure about it, but it could go either way. But there are more ways of surviving things, you know. Number 2. He's a survivor from an erased universe. We're going to be real with you all out there. This is a pretty low-hanging fruit. We know that there were 6 more universes prior to the current roster of 12. There used to be 18. We also know that the GP actually now has the power to erase angels himself. It's not just unique to the Omni King anymore. And this is when we were previously told that Zeno's supposed reason for getting rid of those 6 universes was because of a tantrum. That's what caused it. But now, did it really? Perhaps Zeno is, as we've suspected for a very long time, a scapegoat, a red herring, a puppet. Even the whole horsey situation paints the Zenos as more unaware creatures than divine deities. They just exist. Isn't it weird that they weren't included in the entire conversation about Mirus? The GP simply gave them some me time and allowed the Omni Kings to have some fun far away from the adults talking about the grown-up stuff. This has definitely reinforced even further that it's the GP who clearly runs the show here, using Zeno as a decoy. A very powerful and destructive and unpredictable decoy, mind you, but still someone that the GP goes to doing his bidding. A gentle nudge in his ideal direction. The GP doesn't need direct power, he can just guide it. With the Omni King there, keen not to do any work and instead play all the time, will do whatever will get the job done faster. Ideal for the father of the angels, very convenient. Now to be clear, we don't think that there's anything nefarious behind this relationship. It's not like the earlier theories thinking that the GP was a bad guy. In the way it's presented here in Super, the GP seems to be really appreciating humility though. Something that he himself might be very familiar with, not assuming the role of an Omni King. The horsey scene wasn't meant to be a punishment, not really. It was a way to take Shin and Beerus down a peg or two, no pun intended, get them off their high horses. They are the horses now! Now let's think about it. The way in which the GP handled Mirus and his erasure was very similar to the way in which the Tournament of Power had been dealt with. It was a selfless act that saved the day ultimately. Not the winner of the tournament. Android 17 passed the test before, and now Shin's gone and done the same thing. But what about Granolah in all of this? Well, what if he is smart enough to have figured this stuff out? What if he really is the survivor of an erased universe? And what if his interest in 7-3 is because it has already proven that he can copy angelic abilities? To take revenge on Zeno might be Granolah's goal. Maybe the GP and other godly beings too, by using their own power against him. After all, Dragon Ball Super has told us many times that the world of the Kais is pretty incompetent. It sort of feels like poetic justice in a way. Kind of like what Hearts was trying to do in Super Dragon Ball Heroes, but hopefully here it's better explained. Seriously, if Hearts had just said his motive at the start of the series, I would have had a much higher estimation of the dude. And that's not just because he's voiced by Dio. How likely do we think this is? Well, we say 7 cereal bowls out of 10 here, due to the seed of the raised universes being planted in our minds, and some of said seeds being planted in Super actually bearing some fruit. But there is, of course, a much simpler, more down to Universe 7 type of explanation perhaps for Granolah's origins, which might ultimately be the most likely option, the most boring one, since Dragon Ball Super's creative team like to do the most obvious thing. And that's of course, number 3, Granolah The Tuffle. So, Baby Saga 2.0 anyone? But in all seriousness here, the only named Tuffles that we have are Dr. Raichi and either Zabuto or Zorloin, since we know that there is a Tuffle in the Universe 2 team, but it was never directly stated which one of those members came from that race. But in our minds, Zabuto feels like a safe bet. Also, While there is not a direct naming scheme for the Tuffles, Dr. Raichi being named after lychee does make more sense, since the Japanese name for Tuffles, Sufurijin, comes from Furutsu, that's, fruit, to be a contrast for Saiyajin being an anagram of Yasai, which obviously means vegetable. Now, while neither granola or oatmeal are named after fruits or vegetables, they actually originate from cereals, obviously. Both granola and oatmeal, though, are commonly seen eaten with fruit. Also, Mirus' name came from surume, a dried squid snack, which fits the name pun scheme for the Galactic Patrol very well as being connected to the Latin mirus, undiluted pure wine. So, that is a double pun, maybe like granola. And also, here are some visual similarities to Tuffles. A weird visor-like thing, a technological fondness, a hair colour that we've seen associated with Tuffles before, as well as interests in a certain synthetic organism. Oh, and also, it would make him a survivor being a Tuffle. I mean, come on, after what the Saiyans did to them? I don't think it's rocket science to figure out what his motivations would be. Kill Goku? A Saiyan? How likely do we find this? Good, actually. 8 cereal bowls out of 10. We feel like Toriyama's involvement in the arc, after reimagining Saiyans before in the Broly movie, might be connected here. He might want to give it another go. The original showrunner might want to bring us some further juicy newer details about his own vision of the Saiyan Tuffle War. But that's not the only war granola and oatmeal could be survivors of. Number 4, a survivor of Frieza's recent expansion. As much as he might have mellowed out lately, Frieza's still a bad guy, and we've seen that he isn't beyond conquering defenseless planets one more time at present in order to expand his empire again. It's understandable that someone might have, let's say, held a grudge all this time, maybe, from the previous outing. But not only that, if you consider that there are people out there who now have the power to stop the evil tyrant, but they don't do anything because they want to keep fighting him, like it's their only goal in life, let's say that grudge can expand beyond just the evil emperor. It could manifest in something else. And knowing that 7-3's powers caused, albeit indirectly, some serious problems to a man that has defeated Freeza twice, yeah, you can imagine why someone might want to use him. This is the way to bring back Freeza into the story and make it work with the heroes, like it's just not forced. But that's not cooler yet. It's still possible though. We give this 7 cereal bowls out of 10. But at the end of the day, it is possible that granola is just, number 5, something entirely new. Or old new. Okay, look, let's be honest here. We've barely seen the guy, and you would think that with the newer arcs, Toriyama and Toyotaro would try to, achieve something new? Try new things? Moro was not the most original villain in pop culture, but at his starting point in chapter 49, he was pretty unique for Dragon Ball. Maybe it's a similar situation here. Is Granola a straight up technomancer? A hacker? Someone who is an antagonist of the main arc but doesn't use his own strength, instead relying on others? Kinda like a more refined concept of Barbary but with a more technological edge this time instead of magic? Perhaps, but we still have to remember the survivor part in his name. And in our summary of Toyballs AF, we briefly touched upon the character of Leela, aka the Western Supreme Kai. She too is a survivor. Her whole disdain for everyone comes from the fact that she was left to die and survived thusly in extreme circumstances. Abandoned. It's kind of overblown and dramatic though, since she spent an ungodly, pun definitely intended here, amount of time in a vacuum, for some reason, and was even more bent on power by the likes of Jiren. Look, we don't think that Granola might be a straight up copy of Leela in terms of motivation, but she might hit similar notes to him, just like Zamasu was emulating her more megalomaniac, mortal-hating aspects. As we said before, Toyotaro tries to recycle and sneak in some old ideas from AF whenever he can, and while Granola may be new in terms of we've just met him, some of his traits might have originated in AF. We are fairly certain that Toyotaro will still continue to try and do this, so we give this idea a solid 8 cereal bowls out of 10. Now, have we looked at every single possibility? Well, no. We'd love to hear your ideas about Granola. Also, I'm sure you can use all of the 5 points from different aspects and perspectives. Ultimately though, what we have from Granola is a pretty short action scene thus far, as well as his design, as well as a matching name pun with his associate. It's not much, but it's enough to speculate. But what do you folks think? Do you feel that Granola is the main baddie here? Or is he trying to stop a yet to be revealed bigger bad guy before the Dragon Team can? leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!